Welcome back to the Dana Grant Show, where I have some special energy in the house today. Paul Denniston is in the house, where he created something called grief yoga. He also wrote a book, and I said it before, but I'm going to say it again. In fact, I'm going to read it again because I believe that what he's doing in the world is so transformative, so moving. And I know he's got to sit here and listen to this, but Paul, you are remarkable. Um, he says, what if grief is something that doesn't need to be fixed, but something to be felt, moved, and transformed? I'm going to guarantee you this powerful episode. Paul Denniston is number one. He's the founder of Grief Yoga, and I can't wait to unpack that. But he's the author of Healing Through Yoga: Transform Loss into Empowerment. He shares how movement, breath, sound can help us process loss and reconnect. And you know, this means a lot to me, to love. And we're going to pull that curtain back. And Paul has trained thousands upon thousands of therapists, counselors, yoga teachers. I saw him on one of my favorite podcast shows, and I'm like, my whole goal was to get him here, and here he is. So I can't wait to hear the feedback on this show, because health professionals around the world, he has taught them all how to create safe spaces for releasing pain and reclaiming empowerment. You know, this is through stories, practices, gentle wisdom. I love his energy already. We've had an opportunity to share some time together, probably too much because I held him a little bit hostage, because I absolutely adore him already. You know, if I could just carry him around in my pocket, I would. But he's going to reveal how we can channel grief into growth and even discover resilience. And most importantly, laughter, how laughter can change grief and our relationship to it. Oh, Paul,
Well, that
welcome.
was a mouthful.
I know. And I said it twice. And you know, I never do that, but it was so important that people understand what you have. And it's just like you're this golden light out there. And and we talked about, I call in a lot of grief. And I think because I've been through a lot of grief. And when I found you, I thought, oh no, we have to share this. We have to share this.
Well, and how important it is for us to call in the grief or to be with the grief
Yeah.
because it is part of the love. And if I
Yeah.
deny the grief, then I'm kind of denying the love. And love is so important. And I if I choose to love in this lifetime, which I do, then I have to take time and honor the loss and the grief. It's package deal.
Oh, yeah. I say we have to hold space for both. That was a difficult thing when I was in deep grief, to hold space for both. That pendulum was swinging, with just, engulfed in grief. And then back to understanding that if I wasn't deeply loving someone, or deeply, we wouldn't have felt the grief so enormously. So let's unpack that a little bit about what that looks like and how people can move through that,
Hmm.
and how
Yeah,
and
well,
how you approach it.
I mean, let me just share with you this real quick with sharing my story. For many decades in my life, I did not want to approach it. I was scared of it. It was overwhelming to me. And so I
Mm,
just did so much I could to try to avoid the grief, whether it be through eating or through numbing myself out with alcohol or drugs or
mm,
sex. I was a constant doer, almost like I was trying to run away from challenging emotions, being it
mm.
sadness or anger. And it's hard to kind of run away from something that lives inside of you. And I
Yeah.
think that a huge part of it is that sometimes we're not taught how to deal with these challenging emotions, how to
Yeah.
express the hurt or the anger or the shame or the grief. You know, our parents, they are primary caregivers, they did the best they could, but they
Yeah.
might not have known how to share that. And so a lot of the times we either turn inward, we lash out, we numb ourselves out, and
Mm.
it is a one of my healing paths as I started to go through this was how much I was holding on in my body, and really bringing that mind body connection was really important to me.
How much do you think shame is connected to grief?
I think it's deeply connected with grief. I think that there can be a sense of I'm ashamed as a young boy growing up in Texas that I'm feeling this sadness. I'm ashamed to cry because, hey, boys aren't supposed to cry. Go do
Right.
something about it. I'm
Yeah.
ashamed of my body. And so, in that, as I numb the feelings out, I'm eating things, and so I'm a heavy kid. And being ashamed of the body, I would try to avoid any type of exercise because I was
Yeah.
so insecure. And I would wear like a jacket in the hot, humid days of summer, almost like a protective shield. But
Oh, I get that one.
the shame would continue to grow. I'm ashamed of, like using substances to numb these feelings out. I'm ashamed of who I am and I've got to hide myself here. Shame is a very powerful part of grief that absolutely it sabotages our self-worth.
I love that you said that. I think it was Gabe Mate, and I probably say his name wrong continually, but he has a different relationship with, shame and addiction. It's more about what we're not willing to feel, and in using so much love and compassion for ourselves. And I think that was a catalyst for me. And when you said you had that jacket on and you did want to share, I remember covering my legs up, and we talked about this earlier with the 17 forms of staff in there. And I'm literally, I've got boots on, and it's weeping through and I can see it, but I'm not going to show anybody. And I am creating an environment that doesn't need air to grow. And I was terrified of showing and letting the air hit it. It's still somewhat challenging to even walk through the house alone and not cover that up, because what if somebody saw? What if, and I think I have to go in that mirror all the time and say, you didn't lose these legs. They're so beautiful.
Mm.
And they're going to walk that community. We talked about that earlier, but I love that you shared that
And to
shame and the
think about
grief.
shame literally
Yeah,
means to hide,
to
to
hide
cover.
the
And perhaps
secrets.
we were projected shame onto us when we were younger. You
Yeah,
should be this way. And that's
yeah,
a clear place also to notice whether shame shows up is the word
mm,
should. I should be doing this, or you should be doing that. That's a
mm,
clear place where shame begins to
mm,
show up. But also, just to take, for instance, I'll just share personally about even my
yeah,
body. There was a sense of feeling ashamed about my body. And even as I would say, as a teenager, or no, actually like around 19 or 20, I started to notice like that I would grow like acne and pimples on my back, and I was very ashamed of it. But there was a point where I was like, you know what, let me just accept this, and I'm going to take one step, and I'm going to walk around my house without my shirt on and just kind of open it up. And it was that sense of acceptance and kind of releasing that kind of cover. That was just a small step, but right then the acne completely cleared up. So it's just
yeah,
it is a place of like and I come from a place of a 12-step background also. The shame, just all it needs to do is to be shared sometimes too. And that whether it be to a trusted confidant, to higher power, even just
yeah,
witnessing it to yourself by just writing about it. All,
yeah,
shame is just, it is desiring compassionate expression and witnessing to
yeah.
uncover what we're trying to hide.
And what I leaned into, and I'm constant, when I found you, it was like a script of like I couldn't stop reading, following, experiencing everything you were teaching. It just spoke to me, deeply spoke to me. But it's almost like you allowed shame and the wisdom, all of it, just to breathe. And I know breath work is a big part of this, but just to let it breathe, just open it up. And I always think the heart expands and the ego contracts and hides and, judges. And here the heart just wants to just breathe. And that's the first thing I felt with you is, oh, he's letting everything just breathe.
Well, and that comes from a place where you mentioned before how I said, grief doesn't need to be fixed. And
Yeah.
sometimes that can come with a place of just being and breathing with it. And I also want to recognize for some people who are experiencing grief, it might be hard to do that because a normal reaction that happens within our breath is sometimes our breath becomes very shallow because when
Yeah.
we breathe deeply, we feel deeply. And so
Mm,
finding that space where we can come from a place of being and breathing deeply will support it. But I also believe that we also need to do something about it too. And from
Hmm.
my work too, it's doing techniques that perhaps can begin to start to release whatever that pain, that struggle, shame, anger, hurt, to help us to tap into the grief. And I think that so it's a combination. It's important to be with it, and sometimes we need to do something with it too.
Oh gosh, I love that so much. I was in a course most recently. It was a writing course, and there was somatic breath work where you're breathing, you're pushing, and it's just like, when is this breath work? I'm hyperventilating, but it's amazing what came up from the body that was so unexpected. And
Yeah.
once again, what was it was grief, and I'm like, not again. And it's amazing how it can hide and morph and in the shadow work. I think that's why we call it the shadow work. So tell me about let's go back into your story. So here you are, this kid in Texas. What made you create grief yoga?
Well, let me tell you something. It is kind of crazy because I come from a Southern Baptist father, and my mama was a Christian school teacher. So me being a yoga teacher, they're like, "You're doing the devil's work."
Oh, ain't gonna be no yoga at Sunday service. We're not practicing any breath work, right?
Well, I finally got to a point too where I would tell them, I'm like, because they were like worrying that I'm
Yeah.
praying to some false god, and I'm
Oh,
like,
right.
I shared with them. I'll come in later of my journey to it, but I also, for some people who are worried about yoga going against their faith and their religion, I also wanted to say, what does yoga literally mean? So yoga means union,
Yeah.
connection, which also, when we are experiencing grief and loss, there is a place of disconnection.
Yeah.
So, what a lovely thing to be able to offer a
Get to
place of
connect.
connection. But
Yeah.
even that space of an obstacle of like, I'm afraid this is going to go against my religious belief or my faith. When I shared with my mother, who's a faith, a strong, you know, Jesus, is the
Love
leader and
and
stuff.
faith. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm like, I don't want to deny that because
Yeah.
it is a connection of mind, body, and spirit. And
Yeah.
so I shared with her, I'm like, Mom, I'm like, you could use this as a place of body prayer to Jesus if you want. You
Yeah.
can bring in whatever your faith and your belief is. And for the people who, let's say, aren't who are atheist or something, whatever your connection to spirit is, it could be nature, higher power, it could be, whatever that means to you. So it is just bringing a place of mind, body, spirit connection in that way.
You,
But I'll
yeah.
tell you, when it took me a while to get to that point, but because when I left Texas and came into that place of both addiction and doing, here's where it really first showed up. I didn't identify it as grief. What I
Right.
identified it as
Yes.
anxiety. Yeah, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm worried. Well, part of that was because I was always in my head. I was in the past or I was in the future, and I was holding on to so much because I wasn't allowing myself to feel it. And I was just trying to seek something that could bring peace. And so I heard about yoga. I was like, let me go try what this is all about. I
Right.
remember going into a yoga class, and the first thing I really noticed it was just filled with mirrors. And so it's like, oh, you got to really embrace just kind of taking a moment and looking at yourself here. And when I
Mm.
would do that, I would be like, oh my gosh, you're fat, and oh gosh, this is not going to work out. It was all of those inner kind of like critical thoughts that was turned
Right.
inward, right? And
Right.
so I remember a lot of the times what happens in a yoga class can also be a reflection of what happens outside of the yoga class. And I noticed that
Mm.
in the yoga class, what I was doing is I was comparing myself to others. Oh, I'm not as good as everybody else is, right? But I also kind of felt in some ways like just maintain it, hold on to it. You know what I mean? You don't want to like you try to hold yourself, compose yourself for God's
Yeah.
sakes. And what was happening is it's literally that sense of like trembling, right?
Yeah. It's like
Like
I just need to get through. I just need to get through.
well, and I swear to God, I was looking at that door, and I'm like, I could just bolt out of here, which is my normal reaction. I
Yeah.
tended to want to run away from challenging emotions,
Yeah.
right? But I
Yeah.
allowed myself in that moment to stay 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes.
Mm.
But it was
Love that.
interesting too, even as I'm kind of trembling like a boiling teapot that wants to explode, the teacher noticed I was struggling, came over to me, kind of whispered in my ear, it's like, if
Mm,
you need to rest, it's okay to rest. And the kindness that she provided dropped me to my knees. It
wow.
gave me this release that I couldn't contain anymore. But then it gave me that space where I honored the grief and the sadness, but it also goes, okay, now step back up, go back into it again. And at the end of the practice, I found the sense of peace that I had been seeking. And I was like, wow, I need more of this. And then
Mm,
as I continued to move forward with it, I became a teacher within yoga, and I started to really get curious about all of the different modalities, which as a teacher of yoga, I teach hatha, vinyasa flow, kundalini yoga, restorative yoga, laughter yoga. And I was really drawn to, in some ways, trying to find this powerful yoga to do. But the truth of the matter is, I was still struggling on the inside. I was still
mm,
numbing myself. I would get high before I would go to a yoga class. I would start to get really, like, really embrace, like, I'm powerful, I'm strong. But inside, there was a part of myself that was broken that I was still trying to access. And
yeah.
what happened was, as I had an accident, I fell back, I had a traumatic fall, and I broke my arm, but I had also been dealing with lower back issues. It was starting to hurt to walk. So there were so many traumatic things from a physical standpoint
Yeah.
that forced me to stop and slow down and be with what was really underneath it all, which was all of this
Yeah.
grief, the anticipatory grief I was dealing with my sister who was passing away, the
Oh,
grief of not being able to, all of the shame, perhaps, I was a gay kid growing up in Texas, and all of that grief that was there, the longing
yeah.
and the loneliness that I was feeling and wanting that space of connection.
Yeah.
So, and the way I was covering it up. And so in that moment, it was actually my rock bottom, but it also was a place for me to go, you know what? I need to try something new here. And for me, as a person, that meant going to recovery and releasing, these substances that I was using to numb. But as a yoga teacher, then too, it gave me a space to go, you know what? Yoga is for everybody, even for those who might have a broken arm and can't even get into downward facing dog. It's why I teach
Yeah.
from either a chair or a yoga mat right there.
Yeah, I
Because,
love that you do that. We
yeah,
talked about that, when I was in Italy, we talked about how I had this yoga teacher come in for my clients and I'm on the floor and I'm looking at my ankles like this and I'm 80 pounds overweight. I always show up and I had to assess. Oh, my body was holding so much grief. I
yeah,
can now look back on it and I can see, but then I just thought you've got to lose weight. You've got to I couldn't have done anything. I tried so hard, but nothing was going to happen until I addressed the grief, the deep grief, the shattering grief, the silent grief, the levels of so much grief that I had stored. And my
yeah,
body just said, no more. We're not cooperating anymore. You can show up, you can build. And I would say, no matter what my weight is, I'm always going to show up. Look at how I'm showing up. And all of a sudden, I started to fall. I had 3 falls in Italy and tripped because my balance was, I was moving too, and I said, this has to stop. And there was a catalyst. So it's interesting, the parallel of our stories and
yes.
what we don't want people to know. And I always say secrets kill. And I think they do because we don't let the truth breathe. And
Mm,
we've got to find a mentor or someone that is compassionate enough and that we trust to share a story with someone. And for me, it was someone on a boat. I just showed my legs. Everyone's in a bikini and a bathing suit, and I just showed my legs to her. And I couldn't breathe. I wanted to jump off and go to the end of the lake, but
mhm.
that was it didn't seem like a big step for me. It was huge. It was about being seen, and
And just sharing the truth, the
sharing
truth.
the truth.
And the truth is, I think that we all kind of experience this, we're struggling, we're suffering in our own way, and a lot of the
Yeah,
times we don't share about it. How are you today? I'm fine,
yeah,
I'm okay. When
yeah,
in some ways, the body doesn't lie. The body will speak the truth, and the body's going to show up and say, "Hey, you have pain here. This needs to be addressed." And
Yeah.
as I created grief yoga, I was also a very big component of that pain that we experience. It demands expression, and
Right.
so I love the Holocaust survivor psychologist Dr. Edith Eger,
Yeah.
who she shares about how expression is the opposite of depression and how important that is. And so with
Mm.
an expression, it can be how, let me share and let me talk about it, but sometimes within grief, within guilt or shame, we might not have the words to articulate it too. And so my practice is really about movement, breath, and sound to open up the throat so we can kind of start to allow the grief to be with it, but it began to start to move through.
Let's talk about that. I love that you just started there, that this is what my practice is. What about the people that don't recognize the grief yet? And we all know the body, the chakras, and the energy that our body holds. Boy, oh boy,
So
does our
what is
body.
your
Yeah.
so you then can get
Yeah.
yourself, yeah, so for some people are like, I'm not dealing with grief. So
Yeah.
here's something, the way that you
I'm
can
not
look.
sad. I'm not grieving. And I'm like, well, grief can show up in a lot of different ways. How do you talk to
Where,
them?
what are you struggling with? Are you
Mm,
experiencing struggle or pain either in your life or in your body? And
mm,
let's say, well, yeah, I'm overwhelmed and I'm tense and I'm frustrated or whatever that is. So
mhm.
great. Let's go there. See, but I'm aware though too that those are just layers. And then once those layers, whether it be anxiety or frustration or whatever, once those get stripped back, what's beneath it, perhaps a lot of the times it could be sadness or grief, but we'll address wherever you are, what's your pain and struggle, and then how can we transform that with movement, breath, and sound.
Does everyone have grief?
Um, I think if you choose to love, I think you experience grief.
Mhm.
For those who choose to not love, I think that perhaps I think that people might experience grief but to try to numb it or run away from it, to not address it. And there are some people who grief might feel a little bit like a luxury. Let's say someone who a
Mm,
loved one, like a partner passed away, and they're like, I can't deal with my grief right now. I have to take care of my children right now. And so
mm,
grief is something that I believe doesn't go away. It might be put up in a shelf and might be addressed later. Waves of grief can start to come on. And I think of a little bit like grief, a little bit like I'm standing in on the beach, right? And I look at the beach could be waves of grief. And sometimes there are some days where it's like it's out there and it's not bothering me today. And there's some days that I'm feeling a little solemn and it's almost like the waves come and touch my feet. And then there are other days where it's like a big wave comes over and knocks me down to the ground. So I think that I'm a believer that grief needs dedicated time and space. And so when we allow ourselves the space to be with the grief, it actually helps us to see what's important in our life, what's meaningful in
mm.
our life, to be able to both coexist.
Oh, I love that because I often talk about holding space for both, and I could really tap into the love and the expansion that we wouldn't have the grief if we didn't love so deeply.
Yeah.
I will never apologize for loving deeply, but with that comes deep grief,
Yeah,
deep
it's a
sorrow.
cost. There's a cost to it.
There's a
Yeah.
cost to it. And I think that, I don't know if we're born that way, maybe just this Libra in this world, maybe it's just my calling, but yeah, I'm never not going to love deeply. It's not like I'm never going to love again. It sounds like a country song too. We already went there, but the pendulum swings. What about the people that can't shake the grief? They can't come to terms with the grief. And is there a level that they store and they almost become addicted to grief?
Well, there's a place where some people feel like if they don't want to, like they have to hold on to the grief in order to keep the loved close. Like if I
Mm,
were to stop the grieving, okay, I'm going to bring my sister out here. Okay, so let's say here that I have to constant this is my sister who
Ah,
passed away from cancer.
beautiful.
I have to
It's
keep
beautiful.
that place of grief so I can stay connected with her, right?
Oh,
So, what if instead, I think that it transforms a little bit. I think that the pain deserves attention and demands expression, but there is also a place where if we allow ourselves to be with the grief and move with the grief, perhaps what comes out on the other side is more of the place of I appreciate the love that I have with her, and maybe it is a different connection now that I have. But look, my sister's birthday is coming up, and I can feel that's coming, and it's
mm,
okay to like feel I wish she was still here.
yeah,
I miss her. I miss her
yeah.
presence. But the love and the grief are connected in some ways, and so
Mm,
that's an important thing for me. And I think that for some people who feel like they want to deny it or push it away, something that can happen then too is depression can start to show up, or even a place where they're not even feeling happiness or laughter anymore.
mm,
Because, sometimes happiness, um, laughter and grief can be a very kind of fluid connection in some ways
yeah,
too. And so because I have given the space to be with grief, it's actually allowed more space of happiness and joy in my life too, because I'm honoring both.
right. I love that. There's still grief, there's still loss, but you're honoring the love, the connection,
Yeah.
and and you're allowing yourself to celebrate. I think giving ourselves permission, not
Mhm.
only to grieve, but to hold the space for the love and the celebration. I think that's such big movement.
Yeah, because I know she would want me to still be
Yeah,
happy or to she loved
yeah,
my laugh. I think that
yeah,
she would want me to, "Hey, you're still alive. Live your life." Do you know what I mean? So I
yeah.
think that I can't help but feel the sadness in that way, but I also am saying, and it's my choice, and I want to choose to seek out things that bring me happiness too, because she would approve and she would want that for me too.
Yeah, I love that. And you're absolutely right about that. Out of all the questions I wrote, there was one I went back, I highlighted, I think like 40. And I'm going to look down and see if which ones illuminate. But one bounced out. I mean, literally bounced off the page, and I circled it twice. And when I put a box around it, it means something deep. It's got to be explored. And it was, is there really a connection between laughter and grief?
Yeah, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I want to talk about that. Laughter and grief.
Can
Yeah.
I tell you a couple of pioneers that I learned from that were really educational for me?
Oh,
Go-
absolutely. I'm giving you the birth to go anywhere you want to go because I think you're a genius at what you do. And I mean, I'm like bated breath waiting to listen to you. And I believe the audience that is as well, I believe.
Oh,
And for the ones of you that that didn't see the picture of his sister, it would be on YouTube. If you're listening in, hop over to YouTube and you get to see that beautiful illuminating. I mean, it was radiating light, whether he knows it or not, radiating light. It was
that's so
gorgeous.
sweet.
Yeah.
You know, um, Someone who was a pioneer with understanding about laughter and pain was Norman Cousins. He was
Mm,
given 6 months to live, and he
mm,
was experiencing a lot of pain in his body, but he decided that given 6 months to live, he was going to explore laughter as a form of medicine and therapy. And so the way he did it is he would commit to 20 minutes of laughter every day. He would watch like the Marx Brothers or Candid Camera, and he would have this hearty, robust laughter. But what he discovered afterwards is it gave him 2 hours of pain free sleep. And so he was like, let me keep trying to explore this, using laughter as a medicine. And he kept committing to this form of laughter. And what was a 6 month diagnosis, he ended up to live 20 years. He wrote a really powerful book called Anatomy of an Illness. And
mm.
there are many pioneers who use laughter to help with pain, whether it be Patch Adams, who would bring laughter in to help with kids who were sick,
Yeah.
Or there was Dr. Madan Kataria, who was a doctor who wanted to incorporate laughter with his patients. His wife was a yoga teacher, and they would explore going to the park and explore using laughter as a way of they were using humor, but they were trying to see what would work with their patients. Some people didn't really like it because everybody's humor is different, but
Right.
his wife, would show how laughter exercises would support it,
Mm.
and so that's how they developed laughter yoga, which there's thousands of laughter clubs all around the
Yeah.
world. But the main important thing about it is it's a fine line between laughter and grief. As
Yeah.
I will incorporate when in a grief yoga class, we express and move the pain through, the pain demands expression, and have
Right.
a moment to witness the grief. I will shift the class towards flowing meditations, towards love, grace, and gratitude, but I sometimes also incorporate laughter techniques because sometimes people will embrace a little bit of laughter and then all of a sudden start to cry.
Right.
And the laughter, in an interesting way, allows the free flow of emotions to move through. And there
Mm.
is this scientific observation that talks about how the body can't tell if laughter is real or fake. But when we laugh, the endorphins are being released from the brain, and it actually helps with our breathing. The secret to deep breathing,
Mm.
it's not the inhalation, it's the exhalation. And when you're laughing, you're exhaling a lot of stale oxygen so you can breathe fresh oxygen in. And it's just another way of using sound as a way to release pain or to help
Right.
us to open the heart.
I love that. I was thinking when you were talking, I speak at a grief group of loss. And when they originally, there were a lot of loss of children. And I've recently had
Mhm.
a client, a long-term client, lose a 15-year-old daughter. And so much grief, so much grief. And my desire is to want to make it better. And then I'm like, nope, I can't fix this. I have to hold space. There's this contraction going on continually, but there's also this desire. I remember when they first asked me years ago to speak at this group, I wanted to be compassionate and deeply hold this reverent, this space. But they said what we really wanted was your humor, your
Mhm.
antidotes. We wanted
Mhm.
your energy, your high vibrational energy to show up. And I'm like, and I was trying to acclimate and be deeply compassionate and hold this space. And then like, we didn't need any of this. But I also know that it's a different kind of grief. And I think there's all levels of grief, but the loss of a child, that kind of grief, it's very difficult for them to move on and hold this joy and this breath work and this space that they let go. Like you said earlier, if they let go of that grief, they've let go of the memory of all of it. What would you speak? Because that just dropped right in, and then I'm currently, and it's a difficult coin for me to flip, and of course I'm not an expert like you.
My stepson passed away at 21, and
Mm,
I had to
sorry.
really, thank you, I had to really deal with the grief and the guilt that I would personally experience. I should have done something more. I should have been there.
Right.
All of that is important. That needs to get expressed.
Right.
But here's the thing too. One of the things I whenever I think about him, I'm like, I loved his laugh. I always remember that. But I also want to just when recognizing, at the first, times of that, I wasn't able to laugh. I couldn't get there. When I was
Right.
dealing with that or the anticipatory grief of my sister passing, I'm like, I can't laugh. And so here's the interesting thing, and this is one of the things that I embrace. Well, first off, laughter can be a place where it's like, I can't get there, but maybe it's just this little bit of hope, like maybe I can get there at some point. It's not today though. Okay, so it can be a little bit like it's a little, maybe
So
a
give
little.
yourself permission to say, I don't feel like it's appropriate to laugh today, but I'm gonna hold some space that maybe soon I can do that.
But here's the secret sauce. The
Mm,
secret sauce is that you can actually connect to whatever you're feeling and you're going through and use laughter as a way to move it through. Let's say I was doing laughter exercises and all of a sudden you're like, this is inappropriate. I don't like this. I'm uncomfortable with this. So then that's the feeling that you're going through. You can then use laughter to embrace that feeling, but you're going to use it to move it through. You're just using
mm,
laughter as a form of medicine.
mm.
Okay, I'm really uncomfortable with this and I'm not really liking this. So, okay, but I'm going to connect to it so I can get some endorphins, I guess. So, ha 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 ha.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So it
yeah,
starts to what it's doing is it's starting to move it through, right? Or
right.
let's say someone is feeling a little bit angry about what's happening here. I can't, you want me to laugh here? Okay, I'm going to laugh because I'm really angry at all of this. So ha 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 ha. So
Yeah,
what it's doing is it's taking a moment to just say, I'm going to honor whatever I'm feeling, and we're just using movement, breath, and sound. This point, sound is a form of laughter to just begin to move it through. And a lot of the
mm,
time, sometimes the laughter can maybe start to be contagious, like, oh my God, this is silly, but it's starting to release. But then what can start to really happen is that it can touch within the grief fine line between laughter and tears. It
yeah.
just that space where it can shift, where the grief can move through. And that's I think that's the important part in that space. And that's the key thing
Mm,
we're using in some ways in a form of laughter. Laughter
yeah,
is again a lighthouse of hope, but
yeah.
but laughter and grief can actually be friends.
Oh, I love that. I love giving yourself permission that they can actually be friends. You know, as you were talking, I went into the stories that I've heard a lot. People will claim I'm having an okay day today. And I laughed and I saw a butterfly and I saw signs and all the things you said and it's a good day.
Yeah.
But they have friends or they're having dinner, they feel guilty to go out and they need to share that but then this will be the caveat. But I'm still hurting and still suffering and still grieving. And I'm like, of course you are.
Yeah.
Of course you are. But I think they feel like if they move on, no one will show up for them and support them in this process of
Mhm.
grief. Because I think connection is big, whom we call in to support us through this. We can't do it alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And and I connection is
Yeah, I don't
huge.
know if that made sense, but it's like I'm
Yeah.
hearing
Well,
these
I
stories and it's like they can't hold the space but for a moment and then they got to let everyone know I'm still hurting and still grieving and don't go away. And it's
Well, I think it's a way of saying for ourselves, let's say, I need to take a break from the pain. It's always going to be there, and maybe it's okay to find a little bit of laughter here, whether it's laughing at any and to just recognize there's a part of me that feels guilty for laughing or to be happy or something like that.
yeah.
But I
Yeah, it's
mean,
almost like guilty. They feel guilty like
yeah.
what am I doing laughing or having a good day or
But even to
calling in a
just say that,
rainbow or
hey, I know you heard me laugh, but I also want you to know too that I'm also really I'm missing, I'm missing my child today, and
yeah.
and it was nice to have this, this friend of mine who lost her daughter. She shared with me. She goes, life is really so hard for me, and she goes, I am just seeking moments where I can find a little bit of lightness and laughter. And she goes, it might come
Mm,
just in one moment throughout the day, but I'm just trying to seek that, almost like it's a to help me as like a life raft in some ways to keep my head above water. So I think it's totally okay to say maybe I'm going to take a break from the pain. I'm going to let this laughter help support it, but to also
right.
just recognize too, and I'm still hurting. I still miss
Yeah.
them too. Both
Mm.
both coexist.
No perfect way to grieve, no perfect way to do it. We talked earlier about there's so many different forms of grief. The silent grief of perhaps getting older or even women going through menopause. It's a new thing right now. It's like silent grief. You lose this ability to have children or whatever it is, and the body's changing. Even for men, the body's changing and we're moving into a different stage, and
Yep.
there's that grief. I think what do you think about yoga and breath, all of that to hold space for that kind of grief that people don't acknowledge. They're like, yeah, it's just part of life. But they don't know why they're depressed. They don't know why they're going through a midlife crisis, which I think
I
is often grief.
I feel grief for my body right now at times because as I am getting older, I don't have the energy as I used to in my youth.
Mm,
I feel a little bit like, I'm not able to do what I used to do. And there is this sense of like, yeah, there is a sadness that I feel about it too. But there's
yeah.
also a place of and my body is strong. I'm gonna be
And
going through and right. And I can, I I I I got COVID or I got a cough or I got a cold or whatever it is, and my body is resilient too. So I think that can happen. I think that, anticipatory grief can be sometimes a big thing. I'm anticipating
mm,
something that I'm anticipating that I'm growing old, or
yeah,
I know that I'm taking care of my elderly parents right now, and my mother has dementia, and
yeah,
there's this anticipatory, grief of them dying, but also the sense of like, and my mom doesn't sometimes even know who I am. And I
right,
think that, there is this feeling like I'm anticipating the grief, but in truth, the grief is actually here and it's right
right.
now.
I'm so
And
glad you shared that anticipate well,
anticipatory grief.
anticipatory grief. Yeah, that was a tongue twister. I think is so relevant in life that we anticipate
Right.
the loss of even the loss of versions of ourselves.
Totally. I've
You know,
lost this part of myself that used
yeah,
to be fun and vital and would go
yeah,
and reach out to friends. Like there's that part of myself that's
yeah,
gone and I'm
yeah.
grieving that. Yes, totally. I'm grieving the
Mm,
dreams that will never be. Perhaps it's like I thought
mm,
I was going to be a parent in this life. I thought I was
mm,
going to do something more career-wise or whatever that is. And so there is a sense of even just losing the dreams that will never be too. I
right,
have to grieve the dreams of watching my sister grow old and stuff like that.
right.
Right? So um yeah, I think that again, it's just an expression of love, and the thing is that it's unique. It's we all express it in different ways. Some people can be very emotional and cry a lot, and there's some it's just like, no, I'm just having a solemn day today. It's
Mhm.
all
What
we all
about
it's as unique as our fingerprint.
what about the anger? What do you think about the people that show up and it hits them and they get really angry and
I cannot tell you, like, this was a huge component for me within my healing because I, I was bullied as a kid. And so when I was dealt with a lot of anger that was kind of thrown at me in some ways.
Mhm.
And, again, you learn from your primary caregivers. When I would watch my father get angry, he would contain it until it would just kind of like blow up like a boiling teapot. And so
Right.
that would be the way I would react. I would hold it, I would
Mm.
contain it, and then all of a sudden it would just
Boom.
unleash, right?
Yeah.
And I did that from my younger days, beating up the bullies, to even just as I became older, when I was hurt by partners, by friendships, by my parents. It would be like I would contain it, and then it would
Mm.
just be like, it would just unleash. And so, when a grief yoga practice, releasing that anger is a huge part of it because what if we were able to compassionately allow the anger to move through? And I have a lot of techniques that, from a conscious pace, we can start to shift it and release it. It can be it can be a powerful thing, and a lot of the times people are like, well, I'm not really angry. What you can connect to is, well, what's the fear beneath it? Because that's literally what's underneath the anger. And what do you think is underneath even the anger or the fear? That's grief. But anger is a powerful thing, and sometimes it's actually protecting the sadness,
Oh
protecting
yeah.
that vulnerable part. It's almost like that anger is sadness's bodyguard. So when you give the anger the space to get expressed, it can actually, in a safe way, it can actually be an empowering thing to see how protective and what a vital part that anger is for ourselves and for our grief. It's almost like there's a part of us ours that we say enough is enough, or a
Mm.
place of injustice.
Yeah.
So allowing that anger the space to move from a conscious compassionate space is a powerful support for our grief.
Oh, that was a beautifully way to express that. I think of years of being a rager and yelling and not knowing that underneath it was sadness and grief
Yeah,
and so much pain, so much pain.
totally,
And when I
totally.
did, it was just, I mean, I think I must have cried for 2 years. I couldn't stop the grief. I couldn't stop. But I remember doing acupuncture once up at a pain and stress management clinic for the migraines. But I realized the migraines were attached to so much stuff in this body,
Yes. Yeah.
so much grief. And when they did these little acupunctures, and there was like 10 people that were invited to this private clinic. I remember not knowing what to expect. I was frightened. And I remember he was a doctor and his wife, and he wrote a book, Entering the Void, brilliant man. And his wife, they were holding space and all these pillows. And I'm like, I don't know what to expect. I've never had. And they're doing the little needles. I had just done Heller work, which Dr. Heller's now passed away. All the modalities there were so off that I'm like, this is a bizarre place for me to be. Now they're going to put needles in me, and I'm on cushions. And I remember thinking, I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything. And they put a needle, I think, in my stomach. And I remember whatever released. I don't ever remember crying and screaming. I was drenched in sweat. It must have went on for an hour. And even the people that thought they don't know why I'm there. Here's this beautiful woman, beautiful life. Why is she here? We're all injured and we have problems. She doesn't have what we I mean, I was very judged and kind of isolated until that moment. And there was so much love and compassion because I guess they all could hear, hard not to hear that kind of grief. They said, we've never heard so much grief pour out of a body. And
Yeah.
I'm like, really? Was that grief that was coming out? I didn't know what was coming out, but it's amazing how much our body can store. So I love the fact that you've done the breath work. And all I did was, and I tried to hold my breath so it wouldn't happen. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. I'm going to hold my breath. And they kept putting those needles in, and I don't know what took place, but there was no containing what came out.
Can we talk about how it gets suppressed in the body? Because that was a
Yes,
very clear
yes,
thing.
exactly.
Think about when it doesn't get expressed, how does it begin to show up? Just grief in the body. First off, let's just talk about how exhausting it is,
Oh,
right? It weighs so heavy on us. And so if you're
yeah.
feeling a bit exhausted from it, what a normal thing that is. But think about it even how it shows up just
Mm,
even within our mind. Sometimes when we're experiencing grief, it's hard to focus. We have a brain fog in some ways. Sometimes
yeah.
we're kind of our critical mind can be really harsh and cruel to ourselves.
Mm.
Sometimes even we're not even present. We're thinking about what we did in the past or fear and anxiety of the future.
So it could be
It,
really misdiagnosed,
yes.
that, yeah, you're not having anxiety attacks. This is really anchored into grief.
Well, yeah. I mean, anxiety is showing up as part
Yeah.
of the symptoms, but
Yeah.
what's beneath it?
Yeah.
Sometimes it even shows up right here. People are grinding their teeth at night, a lot of that too is sometimes because they're having a hard time expressing their truth during the day that it's starting to even just show up. The body remembers, and there'll be a place of like you're grinding your teeth. It
Yeah, the
even
body
shows up
hurts.
within our throat. It's hard for us to express it, and so sometimes
Mm.
as I even incorporate sound, some people are like, I was never be able. I have this one person that was when she was young, her brother used to beat her up. And
Mm.
when he would beat her up, she would cry out in with like screaming. And the father came in and spanked her and said, whatever you do, do not scream. And so that from an early standpoint taught her that if I'm hurting or in pain, I can't talk about it. I have to suppress it. And so
Yeah.
even just making sounds and opening up the throat can be really hard for people.
Right.
It's shoulders, tension in the shoulders. It's like I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders.
Mm.
Grief and loss can absolutely live within the chest space. It can be a
Mm.
place where even at times the shoulders begin to kind of start to cave in to protect a wounded heart. It
Right.
can live within our stomach. Sometimes we use as a way of self-soothing. We can perhaps eat our feelings, or we can choose to not eat.
Mm.
There's a sense of powerless that comes within it. And sometimes that trauma can even get trapped right within the solar plexus. So
Right.
sometimes even just within the solar plexus, it can show up there. It can show up in
Mm.
the hips too. So much suppressed emotions there. If we've
Mm.
experienced sexual trauma, sometimes
Mm.
guilt and shame can live within that space. So it shows up in unique ways. But the reason why it starts to sometimes show up in the body is because it's not getting expressed, and so it gets suppressed.
Wow. Wow. I mean, this is, I would like listen to this podcast on repeat. There's so much valuable information here. Can people work with you online in your breath work, in your yoga? I mean, I'm seeing the chair back there on the mat. Can they show up and like hire you online and say, hey, I want to work through this?
Yeah, I have this community called Spark, and we meet every Thursday. These are live online classes that meet, and every month we choose a specific theme, and all of the
Hmm.
classes are based on movement, breath, and sound. But like take for instance, one month we'll focus on flowing with change. Another moment
Hmm.
we'll focus on befriending sadness. Another month we'll do inviting play. Another month we'll do transforming through fear, but they can show up in that way, and they can embrace the class whether it's from a chair or from a yoga mat. So
Hmm.
yeah, if that's griefyoga.com is where you can find out more information about that.
I'm just looking at all my questions that I didn't ask that I believe that we probably flowed through all of that energetic field. Is there anything you want to share with people that are listening that I didn't ask or did drop into that you think they need to know?
I think that if we're really trying to allow ourselves to be with grief, one of the things that I think is important for us to know too is we have to find things that help us to feel stable and like resources that can support us. And so just some things as you move forward, whether it be you're dealing with some heavy emotions today, or maybe you're just sitting with a friend, some things to always come back to as helpful resources is
Mhm.
feel grounded. Where do you feel stable in your body? For me right now, I'm bringing my attention down to my sit bones and I'm wiggling
Mm,
my toes. And it's almost like just like a tree needs strong roots to support the
mm,
storms, go to your foundation. Okay, that can help you.
mm.
Find where is your center in your body? And when I say center, it's that place of like, is there an energetic support that offers a sense of groundedness or strength? Where would that live? It can be different for everybody. Perhaps for some, it's literally down on where they're grounded. For some, it could be the solar plexus. I'm just going to place my hands there.
Yeah,
For some, it could be a place of hand to the chest and hand to the belly. For
right.
some people, it could be with the hands at the heart. Where is your center that can support you? And then finally, come back to the breath. Breath is that resource that can also kind of bring us into this moment. And I'm just going to take some concentrated time to just focus on my
Mm.
breath. Those are a little bit like lifelines. If I'm feeling activated or overwhelmed within my own loss, or I'm trying to support someone and be with it, coming back to those things can help us to feel stable and supported in the moment.
Paul, I'm so grateful that you're in the world. You know, that you hold this incredible space in the world. And I think grief is something that's complicated to tackle. Our relationship with it can be complicated and
Oh my
layered.
God, yeah.
And you hold such a beautiful space and going through just not only the modalities, but holding, looking at the energy of the body. Everyone's body is different. Hold it different. We've all got different grief and we may have like 9 different kinds of grief going on at one time. But I love the way you break it down and you give everyone the permission to just show up, whatever background you come from. You know, it's I was thinking about that. I was thinking about I work with someone who created holy yoga and has she merged the world of Christianity and yoga, and there's a lot of holy yoga studios out there. And I love that she gave herself permission to do that. I love the fact that I came into the world and have this deep faith in God, and I for years I didn't give myself permission to be the seer that God gave me this gift. It was like I can't be both. But you know, and you gave yourself this permission to come from this background and be who you were, take full ownership and say, and this is what I'm going to pay forward. And I'm going to blend all these worlds and make this work and hold space for more than, I mean, if you hid and you didn't show up, you could never pay this gift forward, and you pay it forward in spades. Yeah. I mean, I'm already transformed.
That
You
touches my heart. I'm receiving that. Thank you so much. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean, I've already taken a piece of what I was struggling with, and it's already moving. I can feel it moving, and it's just like, yeah. You are, how can people find you? Where do you hang out? Give us all the, anything coming up, any live events, anything.
Yeah, I'm going to teach in Oxford in next month. I guess it's September or October. I teach online also, so you're welcome to find me there. Just go to griefyoga.com. Just
Yeah.
check me out there. You can see if you're wanting my book is there, and there's a free companion course for that, or there's free
Mm.
resources that are there too. That if you want to just tap into that, go griefyoga.com is a great place, or you can check me on social at griefyoga also.
And we're going to have all those links available for everyone. You're going to want to watch, or you're going to want to reach out and follow Paul on Grief Yoga on Instagram, because I don't stalk him there, but I follow him there, because I
I
love
follow
his
you too. I don't
I
stalk you, but we're just following
love
each
his
other.
energy. Yeah, it's like an energy fest of just loving what he does and knowing that, you hold space with such love and compassion, and you can feel it, from one heart to another. I can feel it, and that
Right back at
expansiveness.
you too.
And I'm just, yeah, I'm so grateful for you. Thank you for showing up today and being so generous. I can't even believe we've been on this long, but we have. And it's like, I loved every moment of it. And, I just know we're going to stay connected. And
Yes.
I just know that this next year, I'm going to hug your neck in person, and we're going to, yeah.
Bring it
And
on. Bring it
yeah.
on.
And you're going to say, Dana, you're going to need to breathe and do, and yeah. And you're going to put me through your process. And I'm going to be like, yeah, you mean like down on the floor? Can I use the chair?
Whatever you want.
Whatever I want. I love that. Whatever I want. Paul, thank you for
Sweet.
being here.
Thank
Once
you,
again,
Dina.
Grief Yoga is in the house. You guys download this, play it again, save it, share it. I never say that, but I share it as much as you can. I just know there's so much grief in the world right now, and everybody needs a little bit of Paul in their life. He is a genius at what he does. And I always say, everyone's got a genius. You are a genius at what you do
Mm.
and the space you hold. I'm grateful for you.
Thank you, Dana.
Grateful for all you listeners. Thank you for showing up. Until next time, bye for now.